Hi, I'm Calder. I was supposed to get married at that venue. My mother helped book it. But 2 days before the wedding, my stepfather called and said, cancel that small wedding. We're using it for 500 guests. That kid doesn't deserve a place like this anyway. They didn't even tell me. I found out when I walked in and saw my mom, standing there in silence. That was the moment I realized. They never planned for me to belong. They didn't just cancel my wedding. They erased me from the story. But here's what they didn't expect. I'd been listening. And this time, I recorded everything. So, what do you do when the people who raised you decide you're not worth the place you built with your own hands? Do you walk away, or do you burn the whole house down? The morning started like any other Houston morning. Warm air pressing against the glass, the kind that makes you feel like something's simmering even before it begins. I parked outside the venue, a high-end place off Memorial Drive. My wedding was supposed to happen here next month. I had come to confirm a few design details. The manager had called to discuss seating arrangements. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. As I stepped inside, the cool air hit me. The place smelled like polished wood and lilies. The manager, a young guy in a navy vest, stood behind the counter, phone pressed to his ear. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "Yes, sir, I understand. But we already took a deposit from..." A voice came through the receiver so loud it carried across the lobby. "Cancel that small wedding. We're booking it for 500 guests. That kid doesn't deserve a place like this anyway. It's wasted on him." That voice. It hit like a punch to the gut. Preston Vale, my stepfather. I didn't move. For a second, I wondered if I'd misheard. The manager looked up, startled, his eyes darting between the phone and me. His face went pale. I'll have to confirm with the owner, sir," he stammered, then hit another line. Somewhere deeper in the office, a familiar ringtone played. A soft chime. My mother's phone. Everything inside me went still. I took a step forward. My shoes clicked against the marble, each sound too loud. The manager froze like a deer caught in headlights. From the back office, the door creaked open. My mother appeared, perfectly dressed in beige silk, every hair in place. Behind her stood Preston, tall, charming, the kind of man who could smile while he twisted the knife. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my tone steady. "What's the problem?" For a second, nobody breathed. The room held its own heartbeat. Preston broke the silence first. "Calder, son, this is just a mix-up. You know how scheduling can get complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "You mean you called to cancel my wedding?" He laughed lightly, that politician's laugh that never touched his eyes. "Come on, it's not personal. We're hosting a fundraiser for the foundation that weekend. Priorities, right?" I looked at my mother. She didn't meet my eyes, just smoothed her sleeve and said softly, "We didn't think you'd mind changing dates. You hadn't finalized everything anyway." I had. She knew that. She'd even helped pick the caterer. "Didn't think I'd mind," I said slowly. "Right." The manager mumbled something about checking availability and vanished into another room, probably grateful to escape the tension. Preston leaned against the counter, voice calm and firm. "You should have told me earlier, Calder. These kinds of things require coordination. You can't expect people to hold up business for you." Business. That was the word that always came before the cutting part. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like dust. My mother still wouldn't look at me. Preston's reflection glimmered in the glass wall behind her. Two people bound by convenience, not care. There's a kind of betrayal, I said quietly, that doesn't scream. It just sits in your chest and doesn't leave. Preston's smirk flickered. My mother's fingers trembled for half a second before she steadied them. I turned away. Words would do nothing here. They never did. As I walked toward the door, something caught my eye. A torn corner of paper in the trash bin near the counter. I reached in and pulled it out. My wedding invitation, folded and stained with coffee. The gold lettering still shone faintly under the light. I wiped it off, folded it once more, and slipped it into my pocket. My hand closed around it, tight. I didn't say another word. Outside, the Texas sun hit hard, almost blinding. Cars passed. A child laughed across the street. The world continued like nothing had happened. I stood there for a while, feeling that silence settle into my bones. You can't always tell when something ends. Sometimes it's not a fight, not a scream, just a quiet moment where you realize you've been erased. I started the car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the building, the venue that was supposed to hold my future. Through the glass, I saw Preston's arm resting casually around my mother's shoulders as they spoke to the manager. The sight didn't make me angry anymore. It just hollowed me out. You can cancel a wedding, I thought, gripping the steering wheel, but not the truth that built it. I drove away, not sure whether to tell my fiancé or keep it quiet. The silence felt heavier than anything Preston could have said. By the time I pulled into my apartment garage, the sky had shifted to that deep blue just before night fully takes over. I parked, sat in the driver's seat for a moment longer than necessary, and stared at my hands on the wheel. They weren't shaking, but they weren't still either. The elevator ride to the 18th floor felt like a climb out of something heavier than concrete. When I stepped into my place, the motion sensor lights flicked on. Cool, dim, soft jazz spilled from the Bluetooth speaker. I'd left it playing that morning while sorting guest lists. The untouched dinner from earlier was still on the counter. I tossed my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight to the window. The skyline blinked back at me like it didn't care one bit about weddings or betrayals or stepfathers who play chess with your life. I pulled my phone out, sat on the edge of the couch, and opened my messages. The last text from Preston. Transfer complete. Let me know if you need more for that deposit. The last one from my mother. Sunday dinner at 5. Don't be late again. Not a single message asking how I was. Not one that said, I'm proud of you, or I miss you. Just logistics, money, control. I scrolled further back. Same pattern. Years of it. They never really saw me, I whispered aloud. Not as a son, not even as family. Just as something to manage, to keep quiet. My eyes landed on the invitation I'd pulled from the trash at the venue. It sat crumpled next to the candle I hadn't lit in months. I picked it up and ran my thumb along the crease down the middle. Funny, I'd spent my entire life drafting clean lines and balanced structures. Now the one thing that was mine was bent, smudged, torn at the edge like it had always been meant for the garbage. But it wasn't garbage. I pressed the edges flat on my thigh, smoothing it carefully. The paper gave just a little under the pressure, stubborn like me. And then a memory hit me. I was 14, a freshman in high school. I'd spent weeks working on a scale model for the district's architecture showcase. Cardboard, foam, tiny windows, every measurement exact. When I won first place, there was a little ceremony. My mom came. Preston showed up late in a suit and smiled wide when the press arrived. We raised him right. he said, arm around my shoulder. Discipline. That's what matters. He said it like he'd been there through the late nights and glue burns. My mom said nothing, just smiled for the photo, then checked her watch like the whole thing was just another calendar event. That silence, her silence, hurt more than anything Preston said. The buzz of my phone pulled me back. Lena. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, I said, trying not to sound hollow. Hey you, she said gently. You home? Just walked in. Everything okay? I paused. Yeah, work stuff. Just tired. You're doing that thing again, she said softly, pretending it doesn't hurt. I closed my eyes. Her voice was the only warmth I'd felt all day. I just needed space to think, I replied. Calder, she said. Whatever it is, we can talk about it when you're ready. Just don't carry it alone. I know, I whispered. Thank you. We said goodnight, and the line went dead. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, then sat at the dining table, the invitation still in hand. They think I won't fight back because I never have, I muttered. Maybe they're right, or maybe they just never looked long enough to see what I'm capable of. I opened my laptop, logged into the server where I stored all my project contracts. My backup systems were better than most law firms. I'd built them myself. I pulled up the signed documents for the venue. I'd paid from my own account. Contracts, timelines, signatures. Preston hadn't touched this. It was mine. Legally. I opened another folder, an older one marked Vale Holdings. Years ago, I'd helped them draft blueprints for one of their commercial properties. The files might still have access tags embedded in them, tags that could tell me more about the ownership transfers, about who really owns what. If Preston wanted to play games with paperwork, he forgot I design foundations. I know where to look for cracks. I leaned back in the chair. The apartment was quiet except for the city outside and the music still humming in the background. I built houses for other people's dreams, I said quietly. Maybe it's time I rebuild my own. The next morning came quietly, like most Houston mornings. No alarms, no birdsong, just the dull hum of traffic starting to pick up beneath my window and the occasional clank of metal from a nearby construction site. I'd barely slept. My eyes burned, but my mind was wide awake. I moved straight to my home office, still in a t-shirt and the jeans I never changed out of last night. The air smelled like old paper and stale coffee. I turned on the desk lamp, opened the blinds halfway to let in the filtered light, and sat down in front of my desktop monitor. The screen glowed to life as I reached for the black coffee I'd brewed earlier. It had gone lukewarm, but I didn't care. I needed focus, not comfort. I navigated back to the folders I'd opened the night before. Contracts, blueprints, permits. Moonstone Hall's renovation project from 2021 was one of the biggest I'd worked on in the last 5 years. I'd spent months refining the spatial flow, running simulations, arguing over ceiling truss loads with engineers who doubted I could make a ballroom feel like a cathedral. I remembered signing the design specs. My firm's name had been on every document, except now it wasn't. I clicked open a finalized contract labeled Moonstone Hall Rev BPDF, Design Attribution, Preston Vale Holdings. No mention of my firm, no mention of me. I sat back, blinking. I checked the metadata. Last modified, 6 months ago, re-uploaded under a new file name with my digital signature completely scrubbed. I opened another copy, then another. Every single version said the same thing. His name, not mine. Erased, not crossed out, not amended, just replaced. like I never existed. I ran a hand across my face, stared at the screen, and then at the framed blueprint on my wall. The original rendering I'd sketched on tracing paper, scanned and blown up when the deal was sealed. I got up, pulled it off the wall, flipped it over. My initials were on the back in pencil. Dated. Proof that I'd been there. But Preston. He was carving me out of my own history. Quietly. Precisely. The bitterness wasn't loud. It sat low in my chest like concrete settling. Heavy, slow, permanent. A dull ache spread behind my eyes, but I didn't stop. Instead, I opened a different folder, one I hadn't touched in years, labeled just Dad. There weren't many files. A scanned photo, a few letters, and a recording I made on an old tape deck when I was a kid, playing with a microphone my father had given me. In the background of that scratchy audio, he says something I'd never forgotten. A man's name on a blueprint means he built something that lasts, that he mattered. I was 12 when he said it. He died that same year in a scaffolding collapse on a commercial build. By 13, Preston had moved in like a new owner replacing the previous tenant. He shook hands with the same men who attended my father's funeral. Same suit, different vows. And now, years later, I couldn't help but wonder, had he been planning this since day one? He didn't just take the venue. He'd been undoing me for years, quietly, in ink. I leaned forward and hit record on my phone, just in case. "My name is Calder Wynn," I said into the mic, "and I am the original designer of Moonstone Hall's 2021 renovation. I have dated copies, metadata, and signed drafts. What's been submitted under Preston Vale Holdings is a lie." I saved the file. Then I picked up my phone and called my mother. It rang twice, then voicemail. I took a breath, steady and slow. "Mom," I said, "I found the contracts. I'm not angry. I just need to know if you knew. That's all." I ended the call. I didn't expect a reply, but the silence would be louder than any excuse she could give. I stood up, walked back to my desk, and looked again at the invitation on the table, crumpled but not torn. Next to it, I laid out the printed contract, the one with my name gone. 2 pieces of paper, one meant to unite, one meant to erase. Funny how both can feel like funerals. I slid the invitation into the drawer, but I kept the contract out, flattened it, studied every line, every forged signature. Then I printed 2 more copies, one for records, one for backup. I reached for my leather briefcase and placed the documents inside, alongside the original drafts and a USB stick containing every phase of the project from day one. They wanted a show. I'd give them one. The gala was in 3 days. Preston would be there, making speeches about legacy and empire, surrounded by glass flutes and silent approval. But this time, I wouldn't be a ghost in the room. He took my name off the contract. But he forgot one thing. I keep every draft. I closed the latch on my briefcase and slipped into a clean black suit. No tie. I wasn't dressing to impress anyone tonight. I was dressing like a man going to court, quiet, sharp, carrying truth under his arm. It was just after 7 when I stepped into the Uber. The driver chatted about the Rockets game. I nodded along, barely hearing him. My eyes stayed fixed on the traffic as we crawled toward Moonstone Hall, the place that should have been filled with flowers, vows, and laughter with Lena just a month from now. Instead, tonight, it was filled with masks. The Vale Foundation Gala. A night for legacy, charity, and empty applause. The entrance looked just like I designed it. Arched glass, uplighting tucked beneath limestone columns. I watched guests filter in through the revolving door, all silk dresses and polished shoes, their laughter bouncing off marble like canned sound effects. I adjusted my collar, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the building. My name was never on my wedding invitation, but there it was now, printed neatly on a seat card at table 8. Calder Wynn, consultant. They gave me a seat this time. Pity it's still not mine. Inside, the hall shimmered with chandeliers and rented warmth. Soft jazz floated through the air, same playlist I'd programmed into the design specs years ago. Funny how nothing changed except the people pretending they built it. I scanned the room. The crowd was familiar, painfully so. Men who once patted my head when I was 8, now pretending they hadn't ignored me for decades. Women who whispered at holiday dinners, barely noticing I existed unless they needed a chair moved or a wine bottle opened. My eyes landed on Preston near the stage, wearing his signature midnight blue tuxedo. That fake politician smile on full display as he circled the donors. He looked like a man who had just won everything and couldn't wait to remind you. I slipped through the crowd, unbothered, invisible. That was my edge. They still didn't see me coming. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Dessert was served before the real performance started. Preston stepped up to the mic, the applause pre-cued. A hush fell. He held the room like a preacher, his voice smooth as always. "We built this venue from the ground up," he said, spreading his arms. "It's more than stone and steel. It's a testament to family, to hard work, to legacy." My knuckles tightened around the folded wedding invitation in my pocket. Legacy? He clicked to the next slide in his presentation. A massive image appeared on the screen behind him. My architectural render. My hand-drawn sketch from the concept phase. Colored, labeled, polished. I hadn't seen it in years, but I knew the curvature of that ceiling like I knew my own signature, because it was mine. The audience clapped. Cameras flashed. Preston smiled, pretending he didn't just lie in front of 100 people. It wasn't just my name he took. It was my vision. I rose from my seat and made my way toward the back of the room. Rhonda, the venue manager, stood near the technical booth, nervously scanning the crowd. When her eyes met mine, her face went pale. I approached calmly. "Rhonda." She hesitated. "Calder, I didn't expect—" "It's okay," I said quietly. "I just have one question. Did you know?" She looked away. He said you approved everything. Said you didn't want your name on it, that you were stepping back." "And you believe that?" She lowered her voice. "What was I supposed to do? He's—" "Preston." I nodded slowly. "You did what everyone does around him. You survived." She blinked fast. Shame, maybe. I handed her my business card. "If anything happens, documents go missing, calls come in, call me. I'm not disappearing this time." Her hand trembled as she took the card. I turned to leave but paused. "You ever wonder why people like him always win?" She didn't answer. "It's because we let them." I moved back toward my table, slipped into the seat, and watched as Preston raised a glass to toast. His eyes caught mine across the room. That look again, the one that said, "Don't even try." But this time, I didn't look away. He held his glass a little higher, so I raised mine back. But mine wasn't a toast. It was a warning, but not just to Preston. It was a signal to everyone in that room who had smiled, nodded, and clapped while watching my work be paraded as someone else's. I left the gala without fanfare, stepped into the night air with my coat open and collar turned up against the breeze. Houston's humidity had broken, replaced by the kind of dry cool that makes your skin sting. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was too sharp for rest. By the time the sky turned a soft steel gray, I was already on my second mug of coffee. The city stirred beyond the half-drawn blinds of my apartment. Delivery trucks rumbled below, a siren yawned in the distance, and somewhere a neighbor slammed a door like it owed them money. I sat at the dining table, laptop open, blueprints scanned and queued. Each file had my signature, time-stamped metadata, and original version control dates. Legal, clean, unmistakable. I started with 3 emails. One to Ellen Partridge at the Houston Chronicle, a journalist with a history of cracking legacy fraud stories. Another to a city inspector I knew from zoning meetings. The third to a silent partner in Preston's holding company. All 3 got the same attachments. Moonstone, Hall, Renders, Achiu Calder, Win, Originals, PDF, and a brief message. Integrity doesn't need to shout, it just needs proof. I hit send. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for the truth to breathe again. Less than an hour later, I saw the ripple. A blog post hinted at an anonymous whistleblower challenging Preston Vale's claims of authorship. An anonymous comment under it read, "I was at the gala. Something felt off. Those designs weren't new. They were just borrowed." By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from my LinkedIn profile. 3 new messages. 2 connection requests from local journalists. Then the screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Mom. Text only. Just 7 words. "Why are you doing this, Calder? You'll destroy everything." I stared at it. "No, how are you?" "No, I saw your work was used unfairly." "No, I'm sorry." Just concern for the man who'd spent years erasing me, and for the illusion that kept him untouchable. I typed back, slowly, "Everything?" Or just his version of it. I didn't wait for her reply. Minutes later, my phone rang again. A different name this time. Preston. I let it ring twice before I answered. His voice was smooth, measured, like always. "You really think this will end well for you?" he asked. "I think it'll end honestly," I said, not raising my voice. He chuckled softly, as if amused. "You always were too sensitive. This is business, family business. You're dragging skeletons into sunlight." "No," I said. "I'm digging up what you buried. There's a difference." He paused, then leaned into the threat. "Careful. I built this world you're standing on." "No," I said. "You just paved over mine." There was silence. Then he laughed again, this time lower, darker. "I warned you once. I won't warn you twice." He hung up. I sat there staring at the screen, then closed the laptop. The lines were drawn now. There was no walking it back. Behind me, on the far wall above my drafting table, hung a framed blueprint from my first independent commission, a modest civic center in Galveston. The ink had faded slightly, but my name still sat clean in the corner. I stood, took it down carefully, and unframed it. The paper still smelled like the ink shop I'd used back then, somewhere off Richmond Avenue, run by an old man who knew my name even before I had clients. I rolled the print tightly and slid it into a cardboard tube. Maybe I was being sentimental, or maybe I just needed to remind myself that I had built something, on my own, without anyone claiming the credit. "Every empire forgets who laid its foundation," I whispered. And then I sat back down, poured another cup of coffee, and waited for the headlines. Because I knew they were coming, and when they did, I wouldn't be the forgotten son anymore. I'd be the family scandal. That much was clear. But I hadn't expected how fast that title would spread, or how deep the damage would go once it did. The sun hung low when I returned to the studio. Light slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows across unfinished models and rolls of vellum. It should have felt like a sanctuary. Instead, the air was too still, thick, like the moments before a summer storm cracks open the sky. I was reviewing renderings on my monitor, notes from a client still untouched, when the studio door flew open. Calder, Molly, my assistant, rushed in, her voice shaky. She was usually composed, even in chaos, but now her hand trembled around her phone. "You need to see this. Right now." She didn't wait for me to stand. Just turned the screen toward me. Front page of a local business blog. Bold headline. "Scandal-ridden architect accused of fraud. Anonymous sources. Claim designs were stolen." There was a photo embedded. My face, mid-conversation from the gala. Blurry, but clear enough. Right beside it, a blueprint. My blueprint, but altered. They'd tampered with the date, the signature, even added text boxes that made it look like I'd copied Preston's file structure, like I was the thief. I scrolled down. A quote caught my eye. "He's been jealous of his stepfather for years. This isn't justice. It's revenge. No name. Just a close industry source." But I knew that phrasing. I'd heard it 100 times in our house. That mix of fake concern and quiet accusation. It was Preston's voice, wearing someone else's mouth. Molly was saying something, but the words didn't register. The blood pounded too loud in my ears. By early evening, it wasn't just blogs. The article had been picked up by a few regional outlets. Social media didn't help. Threads calling me a fake, a fame-hungry nobody. One post read, "Guess the forgotten son couldn't build his own legacy." And then, like salt on a raw wound, Lena. She walked in, fast, her face flushed. No hello, just a folded paper in her hand. "My investors pulled out," she said, breath tight. 3 of them. Just like that. "What?" I stood, heart sinking. "They said your name's all over the news. That your reputation's too toxic to be attached to their brand. My restaurant wasn't even open yet, Cal. They think I was in on it." She threw the paper on the table. It was a printed screenshot of the headline. "Lena," I said, moving toward her, "this is part of what Preston does. It's not real. None of it. He doctored those files." I reached for my laptop, pulled up the originals, the metadata, the timestamps, my digital signature, everything intact. But she didn't lean in. She stood there, arms folded, her weight shifting like she was deciding whether to run. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "I really do. But how do I know you're not just rewriting history to get even?" Her words cut deeper than any blog post ever could. "I need time, Calder," she said quietly. "I just need to think." And then she left, not slamming the door, just slipping out like something unfinished. The silence afterward hit harder than her doubt. I sat down on the studio floor. My knees ached, but I didn't move. Around me were models I'd spent months building, projects signed, sealed, respected, now all stained by proximity. He didn't just take my name off paper. He took trust. He took the hands that used to reach for mine and turned them away. I reached for the coffee mug on my desk, the same one with my initials, a gift from Lena after we signed our first joint project. Without thinking, I hurled it against the wall. The sound echoed. Porcelain shards scattered across my old blueprints, cutting through them like glass through skin. Just then, my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number." I answered. "Calder, it's Renard." The voice was low, gravelly. "A retired judge, family friend. My late father trusted him." "Your stepfather's making moves," he said. "He's got folks looking into your accounts, your taxes, zoning permits, you name it." I exhaled, long and slow. "You won't win this in the press. he warned. He's built for war. You're playing checkers on his chessboard. I'm not playing anything, I said. Then stop shouting. You want to win? Document. Detail. Don't react. Record. His words settled into me like stone. After we hung up, I just sat there for a while. Then I stood, stepped around the broken mug, picked up the torn wedding invitation from my desk. It had been folded so many times, the edges were soft, like worn cloth. There was a coffee stain in one corner now, a smear where I must have touched it with a tear. I smoothed it out gently. You built your empire on my silence, I said to the empty room. Let's see how you handle my truth. That invitation used to represent rejection. Now it was something else. Not grief, not nostalgia. It was a start. They called me a fraud. Maybe it's time I show them who the real one is. 3 weeks passed like a slow boil, silent, steady, deliberate. No press from me, no new statements, no desperate interviews to claw back dignity. Just work. Careful, quiet work. This evening, the rain hadn't let up since noon. Houston rain doesn't trickle. It pours. The city streets shimmered under neon signs, traffic lights bouncing off slick pavement. I sat alone in a booth tucked in the back of a small cafe near downtown. No nameplates, no valet, no linen napkins. Just chipped mugs, creaky seats, and the smell of wet coats and burnt espresso. Rhonda arrived 10 minutes late, hood up, shoulders hunched. She looked like someone stepping into a confession, not a meeting. You sure this place is safe? She asked, shaking droplets off her jacket. I gestured to the seat across from me. I'm not important enough for them to watch every booth in Houston. Yet. She slid in, eyes scanning the room. Her fingers tapped against the vinyl tabletop, fast and nervous. You shouldn't be seen with me, Calder, she said under her breath. He's got people, city contracts, chamber of commerce, hell, even my church board. He sponsors their luncheons. That's exactly why you're the one I asked to meet, I said, leaning in. Because you know where the bones are buried, and you're tired of being the one expected to keep quiet. She looked at me then, really looked. Her bag landed on the table with a soft thump. She unzipped it, pulled out a small flash drive, and placed it between us like a weapon. Invoices, internal memos, time-stamped documents going back 2 years, and there's a voice recording. I didn't speak, just waited. He called me the week your wedding was supposed to happen, she said. Told me the venue wasn't meant for personal distractions. Said, her voice faltered, said your event wasn't important enough to be prioritized. I felt something move in my chest. Not anger, not anymore. Just a quiet, cold confirmation of what I'd known. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, Rhonda continued, her voice breaking. But he made sure everyone knew where their paycheck came from. You just gave my silence a voice, I told her. That's more than most. She nodded slowly. We spent the next hour planning. Not a spectacle, not vengeance. Just the truth, stripped bare and framed by facts. Her reputation had already taken hits. Projects canceled, phone calls unanswered, grants restructured. It wasn't direct, but it was real. That's how Preston operated. He never pushed. He nudged. And if you didn't fall in line, you fell off the map. I'm tired, she said finally. Tired of pretending like none of this matters. I tapped the flash drive. This matters. We agreed on the next steps. An anonymous submission to 3 outlets, Chronicle, Archline Weekly, and a regional construction ethics blog. All verified, all time-stamped. The audio recording would be trimmed for clarity, not edited, just focused. Her terms. I respected that. When this breaks, I said, you won't be the one they question. He will. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed, just a little. Before she left, she looked me straight in the eye. Calder, don't stop. Not even when it gets ugly, especially then. I won't, I said. I've got nothing left to lose except pretending I didn't know the truth. After she left, I stayed a while longer. Let the noise of the cafe blur into the storm outside. My phone buzzed. Lena. Just one line. I saw the retraction. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. It's okay. I stopped needing people to believe me. I just need them to see. No reply. I didn't expect one. And for once, I didn't need it. I pulled out the old invitation again. The one I'd carried, crumpled, through too many days. Its corners were worn now. A tear down the center, a coffee stain along the bottom. It didn't look like something that belonged to a memory anymore. It looked like a relic. I folded it one last time and slid it under my coffee cup. Just before I stood, I scribbled something across the back. To the truth. The barista would find it when clearing the table, probably toss it out. That was fine. Some things didn't need to be framed to be real. On the walk home, the rain had thinned to a drizzle. The streetlights cast long, golden streaks across the puddles. At midnight, the files would drop. All of it. Emails, receipts, voice recordings, metadata. Time to hit the inboxes of reporters, bloggers, and 2 city council watchdogs simultaneously. No signature, no drama, just information. He built an empire on silence, I whispered to no one. Let's see how silence dismantles it. By the time he wakes up tomorrow, his empire will already be cracking. And that's exactly what happened. Midnight struck with surgical precision. From my apartment window, Houston looked quiet, unaware. But beneath the stillness, something was tearing loose. I didn't need a countdown. My screens lit up before the coffee in my hand cooled. News alerts, social feeds, inboxes, all pinging like a fire alarm in a sealed room. The headlines spread fast, leaping from regional blogs to national eyes in under an hour. The architect who erased his son. They used the exact phrase I had written, the one I buried in the metadata of the audio leak. My voice was absent. My name barely appeared. But his, Preston Vales, it was everywhere. Clips of his call to Rhonda, her voice trembling, his tone smug. Cancel that small wedding. That kid doesn't deserve a place like this. Those 11 words, stripped of polish, stripped of power, struck harder than any speech I could have made. By 12:30 a.m., the Vail Foundation's website was down. At 12:42, an anonymous board member gave a statement to the Chronicle, confirming internal review and suspended operations. By 1 a.m., investors began pulling out. Screenshots of internal group chats, emails, even redacted HR complaints from years ago surfaced in minutes. Everyone had a receipt. Everyone had a reason. It just took one person to give them permission to speak. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just sat still. Finally. At 1:14, my phone rang. Mom. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice cracked before it spoke. Why did you have to do it this way? Because I tried it their way. The quiet way. The polite way. The son way. But I only said, because every other way made me the villain. There was silence on the line. Heavy. Real. He's packing, she finally said. He says it's all your fault. I closed my eyes. Then maybe he's finally seeing me as someone who could do something. She didn't reply. Just the faint shuffle of her breath. Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen a while longer, Morning came before I even noticed. The air was thick with Houston heat already. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. Around 9 a.m., the office door opened. He didn't knock, didn't send a lawyer, didn't bring a single soul. Preston Vale stood in front of me, smaller than I remembered. No tie, no jacket, just anger wrapped in expensive cologne. "You think this makes you a man?" he spat. "Dragging your own family through the dirt like this?" I didn't stand. "Family doesn't make you bleed just to feel powerful," I said. He moved toward the desk fast, slapped his hand down like he wanted to leave a mark. "You ruined my name." I looked up, calm. "You built it on mine." That stopped him. The room went quiet. Not the kind of silence that waits, the kind that finishes. He didn't say another word, just turned and walked out, his footsteps slower than when he entered. An hour later, my phone buzzed. No name, just a number, a link. I tapped it. A private video, clearly taken from inside Preston's mansion. Security feed angle. He was alone, sitting at the marble bar in that massive glass kitchen. In the background, the leaked audio looped from a news segment. His voice, over and over. "That kid doesn't deserve a place like this." He sat still. Then he replayed it. Again and again. I watched him reach for the same decanter he used to toast fake victories. His hand trembled. The glass slipped. Shattered. He didn't react. Just stared at the broken pieces. There was no press conference, no official statement. Just that video, bouncing in whispers through text threads, quiet offices, boardrooms suddenly made of glass instead of stone. I didn't reply to the message. Instead, I drove. No destination at first. Just the city humming in the rear view. Eventually, I ended up back where it all started. Moonstone Hall. It was empty now. Gutted, quiet. No staff, no champagne, no laughter bouncing off the stone walls. I walked to the place where the altar would have been. Just a raised platform now. No chairs, no flowers. From my jacket, I pulled the invitation. The one I had kept, bent, smudged, torn, but still legible. I placed it down gently on the wooden table. "It wasn't wasted on me, after all," I whispered. And for the first time, I didn't feel like that kid in the back of the room anymore. I wasn't an afterthought. I was a consequence. I stood there for a while longer, then turned out the lights, closed the doors, left the past behind me, folded, sealed, and addressed. I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I just felt done. Not victorious, not even relieved. Just emptied. Months passed like sand slipping through my fingers. The world moved on faster than I did. Preston's story burned hot for about 3 weeks. Every outlet dissected it. Every voice had a take. Then, as it always goes, attention drifted elsewhere. Something newer, louder, shinier stole the stage. His foundation crumbled. The board dissolved. Awards revoked. A few formal apologies, most of them from people trying to protect their own names, not mine. And me? I left the city. I bought a modest lot along the Gulf Coast, right where the surf meets the stone. It's quiet here. No steel towers, no glass fortresses, just salt in the air and the kind of silence you choose. I built my new office from the ground up, just me, my hands, and the wind. Wood beams, white walls, wide windows. It doesn't scream brilliance, but it breathes peace. And that's all I wanted. Every morning, I walk the shoreline with my coffee. The waves are never the same twice. Sometimes they roar, sometimes they whisper, but they always return. I used to think silence was punishment. Now I know it's a place you rebuild from. That morning, the breeze was light, and the horizon blurred into sky. I had just returned from my walk when I saw her car in the drive. Rhonda stepped out slowly, wearing a soft blue sweater and a smile that still carried a little weight behind it. "Still don't believe in doorbells, huh?" I teased. She handed me a small envelope. "Something came for you at the old office, forwarded twice." The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Inside, one sheet of paper. Cream, slightly wrinkled. The ink slightly smudged at the edge. "You were right about everything," it read. "I just wish I hadn't been so afraid of being wrong." No signature. But I didn't need one. Miriam's handwriting was a part of my childhood. Grocery lists, birthday cards, notes slipped under my door after fights. No apology, no excuses, just truth. I folded the letter and placed it in the same box where I kept the wedding invitation. The one that started all of this. It was worn now, edges curling, colors faded, but I hadn't thrown it out. I don't know why. Maybe I was waiting for a reason. On the back of the envelope, I wrote a new line. Reserved for peace. I slid it into the drawer, closed it gently, and turned to pour Rhonda another cup. We talked about her new job. She was managing a venue near Austin now. Good people, no secrets. She said it with pride, not apology. When she left, she hugged me without hesitation. No lingering guilt between us, just shared survival. Later that week, I drove past Moonstone Hall. I hadn't planned to. The road just curved that way. It looked different, under renovation. Fresh scaffolding on the sides, paint stripped, glass replaced. Out front, a new sign hung. Crooked but full of promise. Phoenix Arts Center, reopening soon. I let out a low chuckle. "Good," I murmured. "It deserves a better story than mine." A week later, they called about an award. Some urban housing initiative out west had spotlighted my new design. I didn't attend the ceremony, didn't even RSVP. I just happened to catch it mentioned on the radio during a grocery run. Architect Calder Vale, recently honored for his sustainable coastal community design. I turned off the dial before they finished. Recognition no longer felt like validation. It just was. That night, I stood again at the shoreline, letting the tide roll over my boots. 6 months ago, I stood in a glass tower built on someone else's legacy. Now I stood on something I built myself. I closed my eyes. "He said I didn't deserve a place like this," I whispered into the wind. The waves answered in soft applause. I let the silence stretch. Not heavy, not hollow, just mine. And after a long pause, I added, "But I built one anyway." The sky was still, the horizon wide open. Nothing more to say. Nothing left to take. Silence used to mean they'd won. Now it just means I'm free.